want you to picture this. A man goes into a bathroom by himself at a public sporting event. Known gang members try to rob him. They hold him, they beat him, vicious attack. Somehow, while he's being beaten, he's able to reach into the pocket of his hoodie and shoot through and from the pocket, striking one of his attackers. The attack ends, as we know it statistically does when armed citizens defend themselves. The prosecutor determined that it was a good shoot, but he was still criminally charged for something else. Folks, let's get into it. So the prosecutor said that his shooting wasn't the problem. His possession was. No, it wasn't a Glock switched Glock or anything like that. Nothing wrong with the weapon. Yes, he did have a concealed carry license. And yes, in the state that he was in, I believe he also had the pistol lawfully registered. We are talking about Michigan here. So what's the problem? The problem is that Michigan law lists a sports arena or stadium among the places where a concealed pistol license holder may not carry a concealed handgun. First-time offense is a civil infraction, a fine of up to $500, a 6-month suspension of the license, as well as, of course, the pistol being subject to immediate seizure and forfeiture. Now, I know what some of you are saying. It's going to fall into two different camps. On the one hand, it's going to be a, look, this is absolutely awful. This is a travesty. That law is unconstitutional, should be struck down. Second group is probably in the same group, same bucket, but there's two different sides to it. The second group is saying, it's a $500 fine, 6-month license suspension, at least on a first offense. Tom, why are you wasting your time with this? Well, I want to, A, show you how, again, things happen, but B, I want to bring you inside what I believe is the psychology of the engineering of some of these anti-gun laws so that they are designed to not have you care. They're designed to not have lawyers even contacted, let alone a national group try to challenge it. And that's not me throwing rocks at all at national groups. Again, this is rather subversive engineering from the anti-gun crowd that, frankly, you just have to sometimes admire what they do. And unfortunately, this is one of those circumstances. But before we get to that, let's talk about the sensitive places. Let's just update you on this to make sure you're on the same page with me before we go on. Sensitive places. No, I promise there's gonna be no doll or anything like that with me pointing and asking for audience feedback. Not that kind of sensitive place. Sensitive places have been blessed as an idea by the United States Supreme Court as being places where it is constitutional to ban the carrying of firearms and weapons. I'm not asking you to like that. I am simply the messenger here, okay? I'm not necessarily endorsing it either. Let's be clear. The United States Supreme Court, most recently in their June of 2022, the Bruen decision, B-R-U-E-N, identified a very, very, very narrow set of historically grounded examples. Because keep in mind, all gun laws, all gun regulations must come from our nation's historical tradition. And no, I'm not talking about 10 years ago or even 100 years ago. I'm talking about like Civil War and back, maybe even early Republic, 1830s and back. They said legislative bodies, polling places, courthouses, and explicitly warned against expanding on the concept to all places of public congregation. They said sensitive places, again, where you can ban firearms, legislative assemblies, polling places, courthouses, and we're generally only talking about when these places are in active use. So if you've got a little municipal courthouse, which also doubles as the town hall, which also doubles as the general recreational space when the 4-H group gets together or something like that, that doesn't mean the whole building is suddenly banned. So that sounds pretty good, right? The problem though, and this is what I see time and time again as an attorney, is that you can get exceptions that swallow the rule. And that is very quickly where we are getting at. There have been multiple lower courts that have been chipping away and expanding on the exceptions, the exceptions, and the exceptions, to the point where it looks like the exceptions have swallowed the rule. In other words, the exceptions are the rule. Multiple times, multiple times, there have been lower courts, both state and federal, that have upheld carry bans at racetracks, bars, sporting events, sporting venues, you name it, including high school as well as collegiate games, and on and on and on. The court acknowledged that the conduct falls within the plain text of the Second Amendment and even acknowledged that there is no carve-out in Bruen for sensitive places when we're talking about, well, things like sporting events like this. But they still, time and time again, find, there's enough tenuous connections here to say, this is good enough for a sensitive place. Because after all, they've also said that you can ban possession in schools. Okay. Well, a playground at a school is close enough, right? Okay, kids go there. Maybe that's some of the historical reasoning. All right. What about a playground that's just part of a public park? Okay, well, maybe that's close enough. What about that public park where kids also maybe or commonly play? Maybe it's used for sledding up in northern states. Maybe it's used for, I don't know, tennis, pickleball, whatever else you kids are doing these days, right? Okay, well, fine. Well, okay, kids also play soccer and basketball and ice hockey and all these other things. And you can just see that slope keep going. And as a result, a licensed citizen victim who did nothing more than defend himself against gang members who are savagely beating him and holding him, outnumbering him along the way, because, hey, they probably thought this is a gun-free zone. Everybody here's a victim. Let's do things here, guys. That sounds great. Those are the laws that are being created. Those are the laws that are being propagated. And those are the victims that are being manufactured by laws and reasoning just like this. Let's touch on some of the evidence here that explores some of the crime and violence trends around sometimes citizen carriers and gun-free zones and all that kind of stuff. And I promise you, I do want to get to the dark psychology of what the anti-gun crowd is doing here with how they structured this bill. Gun control advocates will tell you that keeping firearms out of high-density public places, it'll make everyone safer. That argument, however, has serious data and evidence issues. The Crime Prevention Research Center has published the most comprehensive analysis of mass public shootings and gun-free zones available. Their research covering incidents since 1950 found that approximately 94%, that's 94% of mass public shootings in the United States occurred in places where civilians were prohibited from carrying firearms. Two quick things. I know there's gonna be some sort of anti-gunner who's gonna post something up in the comment section in YouTube. He's gonna say, no. Here's this other study that says it's 14% or something like that. Yeah, that study redefined what a mass public shooting is to basically include gang shootings and all that other kind of stuff. If you want to play at the vocabulary like that so that you can try to win some sort of argument, you're just making yourself look foolish. Don't even start. Number two, an anti-gun newspaper went through and analyzed all the same evidence and information and came out and said, we completely dispute the findings of that study. It wasn't 90+%, it was 88%. Look, I'll spot them the 88 if that's what they need, and I'll even acknowledge that a 2025 more recent tracking put the figure at approximately 82%. Take whatever number you want, 82%, 88%, 94%. I think the original number is 95 or 96%. Doesn't matter, folks. There are so few areas that are actually lawfully, constitutionally gun-free that if even half the violence is happening there, that's an insane concentration of violence. Gun-free zones are not protecting people from mass violence. They are arguably causing it. They are concentrating it. A predator choosing a target is not deterred by a sign on the door. They are invited by it. And by the way, a lot of the same research also goes on to address what happens when armed citizens are actually present. The FBI in its own active shooter reports covering 2014 through 2024 reported that armed citizens stopped only 3.7% of incidents. However, the Crime Prevention Research Center went through the same case files and found that the actual figure is at least 36% overall. Here is the number that should be in every sensitive place's argument. It should be posted on the signs as far as I'm concerned. Outside of gun-free zones, in other words, spaces where licensed citizens are actually, allowed to protect themselves and their family, the rate at which armed citizens stopped active shooter attacks averaged over 52% across the full period studied, and actually hit 62.5% in 2024 alone. That's armed active citizens stopping mass shooter attacks more often than law enforcement, more than half the time. Again, I know there's gonna be some sort of anti-gunner who's gonna post up, but Tom, there's an FBI study from 2014 to 2024, I guess this is my active anti-gun voice, that said that armed citizens only stopped 3.7% of incidents. Okay, well, again, you gotta look at the methodology. If you go through and if you understand what they're classifying as stops, you can see the issues arise. What am I talking about? The FBI excluded all cases where the presence of an armed citizen caused the attacker to flee before police arrived. So in other words, their mere presence was enough. We're not talking about the armed shooter's body had to be on the ground. We know from the FBI that approximately 90 to 93%, give or take, of the time when an armed citizen produces a firearm in self-defense or defense of another, the bad guys flee. If you fold all those instances back in, unsurprisingly, that as well as some other issues get addressed, that number goes from 3.7% to a very low ball of 36%. But that's overall 36%. That's gun-free zones where we know the vast majority of these mass public shootings take place, as well as non-gun-free zones. 36%. 36%. And that's stacking the numbers maximally against the 2A. Keep that in mind. So I said that it's really important to understand the dark psychology of how the anti-gunners structure things. Let me reveal this to you now. They structured this as a ticket with a 6-month suspension, $500 fine, forfeiture of the gun. Okay, why did they do it that way? Why not make it a felony with 5 years of prison or 10 years of prison? Well, because if you did that, you're gonna get lawyers involved who are gonna be, filing lawsuits and challenging this all the way up to the Michigan Supreme Court and beyond. And if I'm an anti-gunner who I don't even believe in the constitutionality of my own law, is that something I really want? Probably not. How do I get people to not even call an attorney, let alone bring this up on lawsuits and appeals? I know. Let's just make it a ticket and we'll take the gun. It'll cost way less for them just to buy a new gun, pay the fine than it would to hire an attorney. And yeah, we should probably take their concealed carry license. But if we made it a lifetime revocation, again, they're going to hire an attorney. We don't want that. 2-year license revocation, they'll probably hire an attorney. 1 year, they probably won't, but let's be even safer. Let's just make it a 6-month suspension. Then we definitely know they probably won't hire an attorney, right? I've seen this in other states too, including my home state of Wisconsin, about how they do things. I don't think that's an accident, but I want to hear your thoughts about it. Not only about the dark psychology aspect, but about all of this. What do you think is going to be the end game? How do you see things playing out? Are anti-gunners ever going to wake up to what's going on? I think the answer is no, because they're possessed by ideology. And are pro-gunners ever going to start memorizing these facts that are on our side? Because folks, we've got history, logic, as well as the evidence on our side. We should be destroying them, figuratively speaking, destroying them in arguments. Why do I not see this happening left, right, and sideways? But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Be sure to hit that like button, share the video around, and we're going to close out with our ever popular quote of the day. This one comes from Thomas Jefferson during the draft Virginia Constitution, 1776, who said, quote, "No free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. The strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against tyranny in government." I will note he said the strongest reason, not the only reason. It's not just about tyranny. It's about criminals. It's about overall enjoyment, sporting, you name it. I appreciate you sticking with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Thanks for joining us on that video. And if you liked that one, then I think you're going to like these over here too.